Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp of the Lip, and we're going to jump right back into 1985 Under an Iron Sky. Remember this section, we're going to be kind of getting into air power and how that's going to work in the game. Before we get started, one thing I did want to make sure I reiterated to you guys again is keep in mind that I'm highlighting this for you, right? There's so much more deep down into the game that I just don't have the ability to cover. It would take me 20, 30 videos like this to cover everything. So I'm just giving you a taste of the game and everything this game really does have to offer, okay? So trust me, there's a lot going on here. I'm just giving you a sweet little taste of the juicy tidbits. Now, we had shown in our last video, make sure you check it out if you hadn't, this little combat sequence that was going on here. And I had explained to you guys when I showed you the basics of how combat worked, is that there's a lot more that can be done here besides just move counter forward, say you're conducting an attack, and then, you know, have that be it. You have the ability to have air forces become part of this, perform a ground support mission. We're going to go over that on this one. So our Soviet unit is going to conduct this attack again. We're going to run this run this one again, and they're going to attack over here, and they're going to call in strike aircraft to help. Now, when you're doing this as a ground support mission, depending on what type of mission you do, if you're doing a ground support, you can call in 10 of each. Strike and escort. If you're doing a ground strike mission, you can only call on 6. So it's going to depend. There's multiple different types of air missions that you can do. And for all air missions, with the exception of, I believe it's transport missions, the opposing player can call in an intercept. All right. So you don't necessarily just get a free strike on them. They can call in their aircraft to try to intercept your aircraft and stop what you've got going on. So that's what we're going to kind of game out here. And the Soviets are going to have their aircraft come in and help with this attack. And the purpose of that is if they're successful in getting their aircraft to actually conduct this attack, their strike value gets added to their combat value, essentially. So it's kind of like how the artillery does in the fact that it's adding that number into it, giving you a better ratio. That could really come in handy for a situation like this where one side is vastly overpowered. If they were able to have some strike aircraft to come in and balance things out, but they have to be able to get through. And remember, we've got air superiority areas that will change things up as well. All right, so I've got us pulled out onto the rulebook here, and we're on the intercept combat sequence. So effectively what we've done is we have initiated, let me see if I can get some better light here. What is this? Okay. We have initiated aircraft coming in, and they're going to try to intercept them. So you're going to do this when both sides have aircraft who are involved. All right, so for our Soviets, I was thinking we could do a couple of MiGs. Again, we're going to do it small just so we've got examples. So I'll lay them here. We're going to grab a couple of these MiGs, and we're going to say one is our strike and one's the escort, okay? And for NATO, they get to pick what they want to send in, and we're going to do something good. We'll send in some good aircraft for them. We'll send in a couple of these F-15s to do an intercept. So let you guys see their values there. We've got a 10.82, 10.82. And this, when you're looking at these numbers, this is their air attack value. The middle number is their evasion, and the last number is their strike value. Now, we're going to be moving to this chart, but we don't move to this chart just yet because they have to actually intercept before they get to actually come into this. So when we're looking at our rulebook, it points out that there's a maneuver phase. And essentially what you have to understand for that is that you have to roll a 9 or better for the intercept to happen. And that's where those numbers come into play on the air superiority thing. So let me show you guys where we're at. We are in an air superiority hex. Well, I mean, all of them are the mega hexes. You would use this number regardless of whether or not it had this counter, but this is going to come into play into what we're doing. So we see for this, it's a 0-0. So it's not going to matter for our purposes here. But others do change. The left number is the NATO. The right number is the Warsaw Pact on what modifier they get if they're trying to intercept. And basically, the farther you are towards your side, the better the number is going to be for you. So you see over here, it's 4 and -6. They have much better odds for NATO over here. But if we pan over to this side, we see we got -2 for NATO and +2 for Warsaw Pact. And then -4 and 4 way over here in the corner. So the closer you are to friendly territory, the better the modifier on that megahex is going to be for you. And the farther you're into enemy territory, the worse it's going to be. So for this one, since we're kind of in neutral territory, we're right here in the middle, they're not going to have any modifiers. So save us a little time. We're going to say that we rolled and we got an interception. So they did beat 9, so they are able to intercept these incoming strike craft. Okay, so when we're looking over here, this is the part that we're moving to now when we're into our air intercept phase, okay? Now there's one of these for each side. We got one way up there for the Soviets, and we got one down here for NATO. For ease of filming purposes, I'm only going to use this one, but when you're playing a multiplayer game against someone else, you're gonna do this step in secret. All right, so keep that in mind. I'm not moving back and forth just to make it easy for you guys so you don't get camera sickness going on. But the Soviet player will do this on his board. The NATO player will do that on his board. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your aircraft and you're going to arrange them on these boards where you want them, okay? So we see it's numbered out and it's labeled as to what they are. So we have interceptors up here. And then the attack over here. So this is basically for the guys who are trying to stop the ground support mission. The bottom row here is for the guys who are doing the ground support mission. On the right side are the strike aircraft. So they're the ones who are designated to strike into the hex itself. Here on the left, this is Escort. So these are the ones who are protecting the guys who are doing this, okay? So these are the guys trying to score. These are your blockers, all right? So we'll put one in each. We've got one Escort and we've got one that's trying to do our strike. Now here's the deal. The number that you put them in matters because once both players reveal, the opposing aircraft is going to be who attacks who. So one will attack 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and so on. So you need to kind of organize your aircraft in the way you think will be best for you, depending on where you think your opponent might put his aircraft. Maybe he'll try to put his best ones first and his worst ones later on, or however he decides how to do it, okay? So you have to think about that. These numbers do matter. Now, something else that I did need to mention before we continue is that the intercept step that I was talking about before, the rolling 9, so the aircraft that can participate in that don't just come from your airfields. They can come from that air superiority zone, which is up here. All right. So if they're in that zone, which I think was 1, let's see. Yep, 1 right up here. So this guy could join. And if he decided to join it, he would automatically intercept. He would not have to roll like these guys did. All right, so cool little addition there. That's how some of your air superiority aircraft who are in these boxes can get stuck in and protect you. That's why you want to control these areas and have aircraft there. It gives you the ability to intercept automatically anyone who's coming through. Now, the person who's doing the intercept is going to do the same thing. For us, it's not going to matter because both of these aircraft are the same, but he's going to adjust his guys in the same fashion. Line them up here 1st to 6th in the order that he wants them. Now, once both players have set that, then you're going to reveal them to each other and show what order the attack's going to take place. All right, now similar to what we saw in air superiority, the person, once we've revealed and gotten to this step, who has double the amount of steps that the other guy does, gets a air superiority, numerical air superiority bonus. So in this case, we would have a bonus going for the interceptors, since there are 4 steps here and only 2 steps here. So they've got double the amount that are going on. So let's pull up our rule book again, because there is a long list of things that happen once we get to this spot. All right, so this, let me get in a better position. This is our escort combat phase, all right? So something interesting happens once we get to this part. You have to decide whether or not you're going to attack if you are the interceptors, okay? So starting with box 1, each squadron receives air combat against the other. And where's the part where you choose that? Okay, yeah, it's the first line, excuse me. Escort and intercept air squadrons fight each other. Intercept air squadrons may choose to engage, forfeiting their chance to fire at strike squadrons, or evade, forfeiting their chance to fire at escort squadrons. That's what that top line is talking about. So what that means is that when you're at this step, these guys, the ones here on this top line, have to choose. Am I going to shoot here, or am I going to shoot here? You don't get to shoot at both, all right? But if this guy, for example, chose to evade, doesn't mean that he's not shooting. He's still shooting. He would just have to survive to get over here, all right? So in this situation, just in our little example, it would be better to choose to engage here, since these guys, he's automatically going to get shot at regardless, and this one to evade, so he's going to get moved over here for this section of combat. All right, so the combat here is going to be similar to what we saw earlier when we talked about air superiority and how you use the evasion ratings to determine what column and all the modifiers. All right, so your escort guys are going to fire, and this combat is simultaneous. All right, so it's not like you can get killed off before you get your return shot. No initiative, anything like that to worry about. But 1 will shoot at 1, 2 at 2, and again, you're going to subtract the evasion rating from the attack rating to get a number, and that number is going to tell you what column you're on, okay? And then after that is when you're going to look down at your air combat modifiers and apply any that apply, like numerical superiority that we were talking about earlier, which could affect your roll. So the combat value minus the evasion value determines where you are across here, okay? And then these modifiers are going to affect your up and downs, all right? Once all that combat is done across here, everyone's fired at everyone, any surviving aircraft are going to be returned back to their used box, which is the red side. So let's skip the rolls just to save ourselves a little bit of time, because I'll get long and unwieldy if I try to roll for everything. Let's say these guys have fired, they both miss, they're going to return back to this used box to signify that they're done. Okay, so they'll just be finished. At that point, we'll grab this one, throw him back up here. He's in his used box, and they don't necessarily have to go back to the same airfield that they took off from, but they do have to go back to a valid airfield. Once you're done with that, any surviving intercept aircraft who chose to evade, they had to choose to evade. So even if they survive here and they had engaged down here, they still go to the used, right? So you have to choose to evade to get to this box. If you have more than one, you're going to do the same thing that you did over here and choose the order. The owning player chooses the order that he sets these aircraft up in, and we're going to have a very similar situation happen again. Now, something to keep in mind for this part, and this is going to apply to both, is if you have extra aircraft. So let's say we had like 4 here that were all engaging escorts, and there were only 2 or 3 escorts, and any extras that you have can fire at any of the other aircraft. So you could be fired at more than once as long as they're all choosing to engage in that area, right? So if we had 2, 3 aircraft here, they would all get to engage this single strike aircraft down here, even though there's only 1. So extras do get to fire. It's just player's choice on who they're firing at. But any that are matched up have to fire at each other. All right, so again, we would run combat here with the numbers firing at each other, getting our numbers here on the column and the modifiers the same way that we had just done previously with them all firing at each other. And the difference is the strike aircraft do not fire back at the interceptors, right? Because remember, these guys are not trying to destroy these guys. These guys are trying to help the ground combat. That's their mission. Now, before these interceptors do get to fire, any aircraft down here can choose to voluntarily abort before they get that chance. They'll automatically go back to their use box, so they're pretty much done, but you don't run the risk of them getting destroyed. You do have the chance for an abort result to come up when you're rolling on the chart anyway, which would be the same result, but it is the player's choice on whether or not they want to voluntarily abort with this aircraft or not. Now, let's say, just for example purposes, that this guy fires, he misses, the strike aircraft does survive. He's going to go back to his use box. He's going to be done for this period of time. And we're going to have one strike aircraft that's left that can get stuck in over here. Okay, so I bet you thought, okay, well, that's it. Once their strike aircraft are good, then they just get to add their result, and it's not that easy. Remember, when we're looking at these aircraft, or these ground units rather, they have, some of them have embedded flak, okay? So you see both of these units actually have embedded flak in them. The Panzer unit here has a D rating, that middle letter, and the mechanized unit here has a B. A or A plus, A and B are really high ratings. They can fire at, I think it's 3 hexes out around from them, but they do have to keep track of their ammo as well. So if they were the ones firing, they'd have a lot better chance. This guy would still have a chance, though, to try to fire at that strike aircraft as it's coming in. And that's going to be done using this flak table that we'd actually seen previously. You see, you would group all your surviving strike aircraft and get an average of that evasion rating, just like we did before when we were talking about air superiority. And on this guy, his evasion rating is an 8. So it's actually pretty good. That would give him a +4. So you'd be +4 on that D rating. So there would be a very, very small chance of him actually having anything done to him. No chance of any steps being destroyed, and possibly a step damaged from that embedded flak. It shows down here, color-coded again, on what the results are. So just depending on what type of embedded flak you have is what column you're going to roll on, and then you're looking at your modifiers and your evasion rating to determine what row you're going to end up on potentially. Higher evasion, better, obviously. If you have any electronic countermeasure measures, if you're running Wild Weasel, which is one of the optional rules, all that good stuff. So let's say our homeboy actually did everything and he was able to stick in through all of it and survive to get in there. He would use that last number, the 2, that would get added to the combat factor here. So if we ran this again, just like we had done previously and done the ground strike and all the other good stuff, the artillery would add 5, they would have 15, it'd be against their 4, and then we would add the 2 into it to give them a total of 22 versus their 4. Now, something else neat I want to mention real quick is that your air superiority guys, say this guy had gotten stuck in and gotten involved with that since it was in his zone. If he survived, wasn't destroyed or anything like that, after all this was done, he gets moved back up into that box. He doesn't go to one of these used boxes. He's back up here, still able to get stuck in later. So that shows you another good reason why you want to have control of these areas on the board, because it can give you a lot of power when it comes to intercepting enemy air missions. Now, something you need to keep in mind when it comes to this air support and ground support missions is that you get a one shot at it, right? So you pick your planes, you run your planes out. If something happens, they're intercepted, taken out, aborted, whatever the case may be, and they don't actually get to provide their support, that's it. You don't get to fly extra planes again later on. However, something to keep in mind is helicopters don't count towards that limit. Helicopters can be flown separately from our air squadrons that we were just going over. So you could have potentially 2 sets of airstrikes coming in different forms with your air squadrons and then any helicopters you wanted to try to bring in. Like we have, I think that's a transport one. Where's some combat helicopters? I know I had some around here. Oh, here we go. Those Hinds right over here could get stuck in. I knew I'd moved them up somewhere closer to the front line. All right, so that was a real brief example. I know I was using just a small amount of aircraft, but remember that can go upwards of 6 to 10, just depending on what type of air mission that you are running. So that's why when you're the non-phasing player, you can't just sit back and just let the other player do their thing. You have to decide, is this an area where I want to bring in my aircraft? Do I want to give my guy some ground support? Is he bringing ground support in for his? Is he doing another type of mission? Is he doing a ground strike mission where he's trying to destroy some of my installations? Because you can do that to destroy spots on the map rather than specifically units. Maybe you want to take out an airfield or something like that. So you want to try to protect those assets. You need to really think about what you're doing when the enemy has their turn going on. That's the point that I keep trying to reiterate with this game, is that the individual pieces themselves are not hard to understand. And the more you play it, the more you grasp it. There just are so many interlocking pieces, little tidbits that all go along together. So you have to understand all these small parts and how they come together to make this really great big whole. All right, but we're getting a little long-winded, so I'm going to pause it here since we did a fairly good job, I think, going over the air aspects, the air squadrons, how they're going to operate. And that basic air combat principle is going to be relatively similar with other air interception missions that you have throughout the game. I'm going to go over a few more different aspects in the upcoming videos. I want to touch on some of the end of round type stuff and some stuff involved with reinforcements, how that's going to work a little bit, and then definitely touch on some final thoughts of the game as well. Anything else you guys want to see, feel free to put it down in the comments and definitely let me know. All right, you guys take care. I'll see you in the next one.